So, you've received a request for a client's information from a third party. Maybe it's another agency working with a mutual client who wants to ask you some things about them. Or maybe you're the one who wants to provide information about the mutual client. Before you disclose the information, you need to check that an exception for non-disclosure applies. The exceptions are outlined in Privacy Principle 11. It's also a good idea to check with your privacy officer. It's part of their role to ensure compliance with the provisions of the Privacy Act. Firstly, are you required to release the personal information? In some cases, you may not have a choice about providing requested information. For example, if the police produce a search warrant, or if the request is under Section 17 of the Tax Administration Act, or if there's another act that requires you to release the information. This is because other acts trump the Privacy Act. Also, note that there might be another law which allows you to disclose the information. Some laws permit disclosure in specific circumstances or for specific reasons. For example, Sections 15 to 16 of the Children, Young Persons and Their Families Act. If it's not a request you have to comply with, such as a search warrant, and you've determined that no other acts apply that require you to or permit you to release the information, your next step is to consider whether an exception to non-disclosure under Principle 11 applies in the circumstances. Some of these exceptions include where disclosure is one of the purposes which you collected the information for, or disclosure is directly related to the purpose, if you have the client's consent to disclose the information, or if disclosure is necessary to prevent or lessen a serious threat. Note that if you're determining if there is a serious threat, you need to have regard to the likelihood of the threat being carried out, the severity of it, and the time at which the threat may be realised. If one of the exceptions for non-disclosure applies, then you're allowed to share the information. Remember that even if one of the exception applies, you don't have to disclose it. It's up to you. If you do choose to disclose it, remember to only disclose the minimum information necessary. For example, if someone had asked for some information about a client and you've determined that an exception applies, this doesn't mean you should release the client's file. Only release that specific information. You should also make a note of what personal information was disclosed and your reasons for disclosure.